The doctors said I was unresponsive. My family said they hoped I wouldn't pull through. They were wrong on both counts. And that one mistake cost them absolutely everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Dennis Hargrove. I'm 61 years old. I live in Savannah, Georgia, in a neighborhood called Ardsley Park. We had a 5-bedroom house on Abercorn Extension. A real house. I built a mid-size construction supply company, Hargrove Building Solutions, out of a cramped 600 square foot storefront on Gwinnett Street back in 1999. By 2024, we had 53 employees, 4 regional distribution accounts, and a revenue number that made my accountant pour himself a drink every single year-end close. In a good way. I say had, like it's past tense. We'll get to that. My wife, Patricia, had been with me for 31 years. We'd been married for 28. My son Derek, Arshio, worked loosely in the business, which mostly meant he sat in on meetings he hadn't prepared for and left early on Fridays. My daughter Melissa, Arshio, lived about 25 minutes away in Midtown Savannah and texted me every couple of weeks, usually when her rent was close to due. And then there was Brandon Whitfield. Sanjati. Patricia had gotten pregnant by a college boyfriend named Whitfield. They never married, and though the man showed up occasionally at birthday parties and school pickups, he was never a real father. Couldn't keep steady work. Never paid support. And Patricia had sole legal custody of Brandon from day one. When I met Patricia, she was a 2-3-year-old single mother trying to raise a 5-year-old on secretarial pay and determination, and I fell completely, irreparably in love. We were broke and young and absolutely certain about each other. We got married 2 years later, right around the time I was mortgaging everything I owned to launch Hargrove Building Solutions. I raised Brandon from the time he was 7, treated him exactly like my own. Because his biological father was technically still in the picture, formal adoption paperwork never happened. He kept his last name, but I eventually gave him the title of Director of Operations. I trusted that man with the keys to everything I built. Literally. I'll come back to all of them. It was a Wednesday in mid-September when everything changed. I'd had a late walkthrough out at our Gwinnett warehouse, dealing with an inventory discrepancy that had been nagging at me for 2 weeks. I left around 10:15 at night. I remember stopping at a gas station on Duren Avenue for coffee. Patricia had called earlier and said there was leftover chicken in the oven. The last thing I remember is a green light on Abercorn Street and pulling through the intersection, then nothing. A delivery truck ran the light at full speed and hit my driver's side. Paramedics told my family I was alive by the thinnest margin they'd ever seen. They said the door frame absorbed most of the impact. They said a lot of things I was not there to hear. I woke up, partially, 4 days later, and I truly wish I hadn't. Welcome to Dad's Cold Justice. Hit that like button. Drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from. This story is going to take you places. Here's what nobody tells you about being in a medical coma. It is nothing like sleep. It's more like being sealed inside a dark room with no handle on the door. You can hear everything. Voices, equipment, footsteps, the squeak of a shoe on a linoleum floor, but you cannot open your eyes. You cannot lift a finger. You are completely trapped inside your own body, aware of every word being said around you. Memorial Health University Medical Center. Equal. 5th floor. I know because a nurse mentioned it while changing a line near my bed. The first voices I recognized were a doctor's and Patricia's. Day 4. Mid-afternoon based on the shift change noise I'd heard an hour before. Mr. Hargrove is holding, the doctor said. The brain activity scans are showing some improvement. We remain cautiously hopeful. But realistically, he could remain in this state for another 10 days to 2 weeks. And if he doesn't come back from it, that was Patricia's voice. Calm. Measured. The voice she used when she was filing something away. Then we'd need to have a more difficult conversation about long-term options. The doctor said, continued life support. Resuscitation directive. Transfer to a specialized facility. A pause. Then Patricia said it. She said it the way you'd say it about replacing an old appliance. He was always very clear about this. Dennis never wanted to be kept alive by machinery. If his heart stops, I don't want intervention. Whatever form I need to sign, I'll sign it now. I felt something collapse inside me. Something structural. He said it himself. Derek added. He was right there in the room. Almost immediately. Like he'd been rehearsing. He always told us he never wanted to be a burden. That's exactly who Dad is. I never said that. Not once. Not to anyone. Not in any conversation I ever had in my life. He's 61. Patricia continued. He's had a full, meaningful life. He wouldn't want us all in agony over this. 61 is a full life. My wife of 28 years. The woman I had loved, since she had nothing. The woman I had spent 3 decades building a world for. Told a physician that 61 was a complete enough run, like closing a tab at a restaurant. I heard the scratch of a pen. She signed the DNR papers right there, 3 feet from where I was lying. I couldn't speak, couldn't signal, couldn't do a single thing except stay absolutely still. Don't move, don't react, just listen. That instinct may have kept me alive more than any medical intervention. They all came back that evening. All 4 of them. I heard the door, heard chairs being rearranged, heard the distinct snap of a soda can opening. I was almost certain it was Derek. Melissa spoke first. He doesn't look any different. He's stable. Patricia said. Doctor says maybe another week and a half. A week and a half. Melissa exhaled. That kind of sigh that has nothing to do with grief and everything to do with inconvenience. Mom, I have the Forsyth Park thing this weekend, and then Jason's work dinner on Sunday. I can't be doing this drive every other day. Nobody is forcing you. Derek said that. I know that. But he never made time for my things either. Every recital. Every graduation ceremony. He had a site visit or a client problem or some distribution crisis. So I just think it's fair to point out that Patricia's voice, not a reprimand, more like a tired reflex. I'm serious. I'm not going to pretend. She wasn't wrong about the work. I know that. But I was building something. Something that was supposed to give all of them options I never had. Brandon spoke then. His voice was exactly what it always was in operations reviews. Controlled. Deliberate. Dad was always clear that he never wanted to be a weight on the family. I think we respect what he actually wanted. Right. Derek said. Then. Quieter. Besides, once the estate gets through probate and the trust distributes, things simplify. I was in his study last spring. I have a sense of the numbers. At 29, I've been patient long enough. Derek. Patricia's voice. Sharper this time. I'm just being honest. It's not a conversation we need to avoid forever. Not here. Silence. My son. My 9-year-old son had gone through my private files, calculated his portion of my estate, and was sitting 3 feet from my unconscious body, treating my survival as a scheduling inconvenience and my death as a pending deposit. I cannot tell you what that does to a person. I won't even try to put it into language. Over the following 5 days, I heard things I will carry to my actual grave. I heard Derek on the phone just inside the doorway, voice lowered, telling someone he was looking for investment property in Bluffton, South Carolina, said he'd have capital freed up soon. Used the word capital like it was something he'd earned. I heard Melissa tell Patricia the Abercorn extension house was too large for one person and that Patricia should really think about what made sense going forward. Going forward. As if I were a chapter that had already ended. And Brandon. Quiet. Efficient Brandon. The man I'd promoted past people with better credentials. The man I'd loaned $22,000 to in 2020 when his apartment flooded and his savings were thin. The man I'd taken to Braves games. To trade shows in Atlanta. To a long weekend fishing trip on the Okefenokee in 2022. I heard him tell Patricia. His voice completely flat. The cleaner we can make the handoff at the business, the better for everyone. I know every account, every contract, every vendor relationship. I can hold things together. I know where all of it is. I bet you do. Brandon. Something cold moved into my stomach right then and did not leave. Patricia said, let's not move too fast on anything. Brandon said, of course. I just want us to be prepared. Of course you do. Day 8. Savannah, September heat. Even through the hospital walls. I opened my eyes. The nurse who saw it first actually grabbed the doorframe. She called for the resident on duty. Within 10 minutes, the room filled with people who had completely stopped expecting this outcome. The doctor ran his assessments. Dates. Name is Handgrip. Responsiveness to light. I gave him everything he asked for. And when Patricia walked through that door 20 minutes later, her face did something I had never seen it do before. There was relief. Real relief. I am not going to deny that. But underneath it, just for a half second before she controlled it, was something else. Something closer to recalculation. She held me. She cried against my neck. She said I was so terrified. I held her back. I said, I know. I'm so lucky to have you. Every single word I said was a performance. And for the first time in 28 years of marriage, I felt completely at peace with lying. They brought me home 2 days later. Derek carried my bag from the car. Melissa had bought groceries, which I can say without exaggeration was the first time in her adult life she had done something like that for me without being asked. Brandon was standing in the doorway of my own house and said, "Everything at the office is covered. Dennis, don't even think about work for a while. Thank you. Son. The word tasted like rust in my mouth, but I smiled. I settled into my chair. I accepted the dinner Patricia made, and I played the most important character of my career, a tired, confused, deeply grateful 6-1-year-old man who just wanted to rest and heal. I was none of those things. Vague too. I told everyone the headaches were still bad, that I couldn't concentrate long enough for paperwork, that I was dizzy on my feet. Patricia believed this without a second question, which told me everything I needed to know about how closely she'd been paying attention to me in recent years. Derek nodded with great sympathy and went back to whatever Derek did during business hours, which appeared to be golf and lunch. Melissa texted every 4 days. Brandon said, "Take as long as you need. I've got the operation completely in hand." "I'm sure you do." Brandon. The first call I made was to an attorney, not our family lawyer. Not Martin Elks over on Bull Street, who'd been handling our wills and real estate for 11 years, and who I suddenly realized had probably been to dinner at our house twice, and therefore couldn't be trusted to be neutral. I needed someone completely outside everything we'd built. I found him through a fraternity brother from Georgia Southern. His name was Cal Okafor, mid-50s. Office in Garden City, just off Augusta Avenue. The kind of lawyer whose waiting room has 2 chairs and a dying plant, and whose results are known entirely by word of mouth. He had the handshake of someone who charged by conviction rather than by the hour. I sat across from him and said, "I believe my family has been stealing from me. I need you to proceed on the assumption that I'm right." Cal Okafor didn't flinch. He said, "Then let's go get your evidence." That was the beginning of everything. My second call was to a private investigator named Roy Thatch. Roy ran a one-man operation out of a small office on Skidaway Road, drove a 10-year-old silver Camry, and had 22 years of insurance fraud and domestic investigation work behind him. When he listened, he went completely still. No reactions. No expressions. Just absorption. I told him everything. The hospital, Derek and the investment properties, Brandon's. We know where everything is. Patricia's voice when she told the doctor to let me go. Roy took notes the entire time. Then he looked up and said, "How many years were you married?" 28. I said. Roy wrote something down and said nothing else for a moment. I understood exactly what the silence meant. Week 3. That's when it got ugly in a way I hadn't fully prepared myself for. Cal called on a Tuesday morning while Patricia was at her book club. He said, "Dennis, I need you to come in. I need you to be seated when you see this." I drove myself for the first time since the crash. Took Abercorn Extension to Duren Avenue. The same route I'd used almost every day for 15 years. Cal's office. He had a file on the desk that was 3 inches thick. "Your director of operations," Cal said, "has been systematically moving money out of Hargrove Building Solutions for approximately 3 years. The figure at this point is $480,000. He walked me through it. Ghost vendor invoices from fabricated suppliers. Inflated service fees that never matched any actual contract. transfers staged through a shell company Brandon had incorporated in Georgia under the name Whitfield Property Management, LLC. The same last name as his biological father, registered in a state tax office where nobody who knew him would ever look. It was deliberate. It was patient. It was surgical. "He's your stepson," Cal said. "Yes." The internal communications we recovered suggest his stated reasoning was that he needed to protect himself financially because he was uncertain whether your estate plans would include him. Given that he's not a biological heir, I sat with that. He did it because he was afraid I'd leave him with nothing. After everything, I had financed that man's life when he had nothing at 24. I had given him a title above people with real industry credentials. I had taken him to trade shows and client dinners and fishing trips and called him my son to every single person I'd ever introduced him to. I'd told him directly, more than once, that he didn't have to worry, that I would take care of him. He robbed me anyway. "There's more," Cal said. Of course there was. Patricia Hargrove has co-signing authority on 3 of the business accounts. 11 of these transfers required a second approval. Those 11 have her signature. My wife. My wife was not just a woman who stood at my hospital bed and directed a physician to let me die. She had been authorizing the theft of my company's money for 3 years. Money I had driven home from job sites for. Money I had earned in the Georgia heat. Money I had given a name to. I didn't cry. I am being completely honest when I say that I sat in Cal Okafor's office in Garden City, Georgia, and I felt something close, and lock, and go silent. Like a vault door. Quiet. Final. Click. "Tell me about the properties," I said. Cal turned to a second section of the folder. In the weeks before my accident, with Patricia aware and assisting at each step, Brandon had drafted a fraudulent power of attorney document using Patricia's genuine signature and a forged copy of mine. Immediately after the crash, when the ICU prognosis looked terminal, he moved. He filed a fraudulent quitclaim deed at the Chatham County Recorder of Deeds office. He had inserted his own name onto the titles as a co-owner of both the Abercorn Extension House and the Hargrove Building Solutions property on Gwinnett Street. He had all of this prepared. Cal said. He was waiting for the right event. "Can we undo it?" I asked. "Already in motion," Cal said. "The forgery is confirmed by our document examiner. Handwriting analysis is definitive. I have an emergency motion ready to freeze both properties and remove his name from both deeds." He paused. "But Dennis, the moment I file, Brandon gets served. He'll know you know. Then we don't file yet." I said, "I was already thinking about the dinner. About having all of them in the same room. I want to wait until after the anniversary party. Saturday night. File, Monday morning." Cal nodded slowly. "So Brandon walks into Saturday thinking he co-owns your house and your warehouse." "That's exactly right." Roy called 2 days later. I was on the back porch watching a marsh hawk circle over the tidal creek behind the property when my phone went off. "Dennis," Roy said, "you asked about the personal situation. I need you to hear this carefully. His name is Paul Garrett. He's 38. He's a private tennis instructor out of the Bacon Park courts over on Skidaway. Patricia has been seeing him for 17 months. I put the phone face down on the armrest. 17 months. I ran the math. 17 months ago, Patricia and I had spent New Year's Eve at the Hendersons on Jones Street. She'd worn a red dress. We danced badly in their living room to some song I can't remember. She'd kissed me at midnight and said I love this life we made. 6 weeks after that, she began private tennis lessons with Paul Garrett. I stared at the marsh water. 30 years. Not 30 years of something hollow or mechanical. We had real years in there. Years where we built this from absolutely nothing. Years where I drove a second-hand truck and she clipped grocery coupons, and we were happy in a way that doesn't get manufactured. I wasn't some absent caricature of a husband. I worked hard. Yes, more than I should have sometimes. But I was there. I paid for everything. I built the life she was now distributing among her trainer and her children. My hand started shaking before I even registered it. A wave of nausea moved through me so hard I grabbed the porch railing. I wanted to put my fist through every window in the house. I wanted to walk across the yard and throw my phone into the tidal creek. But I breathed. I forced it down. I closed my eyes until the shaking stopped. If I lost control now, they wouldn't just get the money. They'd win. Keep going. Dennis. One more piece. I reached out to an accounts specialist named Diane Reeve. Diane was 46. Had been with Hargrove Building Solutions for 7 years. Was meticulous in a way that made her indispensable, and had been systematically sidelined by Derek over the past year for what he called attitude problems. What Derek actually meant was that Diane had corrected him in a budget review meeting in front of 2 other people, and he had never forgiven her for being right. Diane agreed to meet me at a cafe on Broughton Street. She was there when I arrived, coffee already in hand. And she looked at me like a woman who had been holding something very carefully for a very long time. I flagged the vendor account irregularities 8 months ago. She said before I'd even taken my coat off, I brought it to Derek. He told me I was seeing things, and to focus on my own responsibilities, but it wasn't Derek running it. It was Brandon. And Melissa knew. I stopped halfway into my chair. Melissa, I said. Brandon was routing everything through Whitfield Property Management. Diane said, and she placed a USB drive on the table between us like she'd been waiting for exactly this moment. But he was also writing monthly transfers to something called M. Hargrove Design Consulting. No real client list. No documented deliverables. Melissa discovered what was happening about 14 months ago. Instead of coming to you, she negotiated. She started receiving a monthly payment in exchange for her silence. She has been financing her midtown lifestyle entirely on her cut of what Brandon was taking from you. Diane became my internal source over the next 12 days. She had kept her own records, personal copies of flagged transactions that she'd backed up on an external drive because Diane was exactly the kind of person who backed things up. Together with Cal's forensics team, we reconstructed the full 3-year timeline. Every transaction, every approval, every transfer, dates, amounts, the chain of authorization, $480,000, 37 separate transactions. All of it documented while I was driving home from Gwinnett Street in the dark, believing I was building something that would outlast me. Turned out I was, just not in the way I'd planned. By the end of week 4, the picture was complete. Patricia's 17-month affair with Paul Garrett, co-signed on 11 of Brandon's fraudulent transfers, assisted in drafting the forged power of attorney, directed the physician to allow me to die. Brandon, $480,000 stolen across 3 years. Forged power of attorney, fraudulent deeds on 2 properties. Told the doctor I had never wanted to survive this. Derek, no direct involvement in the fraud, but sat in my ICU room and discussed investment real estate in Bluffton and the word capital while I lay 3 feet away. Had gone through my private estate documents. Expected the money. Melissa knew about the theft for 14 months. Demanded payment for her silence. Told the physician her father was suffering and should be released. Has been living on stolen money since. Cal had the property suit ready in a sealed folder, waiting for Monday morning. Brandon had no idea. As far as he was concerned, he was a co-owner of my house and my business warehouse. And I was home, taking it easy and watching the Braves lose. Let him enjoy that for 5 more days. I transferred the entire balance of our joint personal savings account, $940,000, to a new individual account at a bank Patricia had never set foot in. Every dollar of that came from my personal distributions. Over my signature. Over my years. Completely mine. Completely legal. I had a new will prepared. The old version was generous. The revised version was precise. Here's what I want to be clear about. I am not a vengeful man by temperament. I am a construction supply man. I like things measured, sequenced, and executed without waste. What I was building was not a scene. It was a delivery. I had one final shipment to make, and I intended to make it to everyone at once. Our 28th wedding anniversary was 5 days out. Patricia had already suggested, cheerfully, over a dinner where I smiled at her across the table and passed the bread, that we should do something to mark it properly. Something with everyone there. Absolutely. I said, let's make it a real celebration. Invite everyone. She smiled and squeezed my hand. I squeezed back. Neither of us was smiling about the same thing. If you've been with this story from the start, drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button while you're at it. And make sure you're subscribed, because what happens next is the part nobody in that room is going to forget. Nobody holds a celebration for a man who was supposed to be buried. But that is exactly what my family did. Patricia organized the whole evening. She sent invitations to 16 of our neighbors in Ardsley Park. 2 couples from our church, Grace Fellowship over on Washington Avenue, the Colwells from next door, a handful of people from the old neighborhood we'd known for 20 years. She ordered food from a catering company downtown, the real kind, not hotel warming trays. She rented white linen-draped tables for the backyard. She bought a banner, 28 years. The Hargrove family. I saw it rolled up in the pantry 4 days before the party and stood there looking at it for a full 15 seconds. The Hargrove family. Sure. Let's celebrate that. The party was on a Saturday evening in early November. The kind of Savannah night, where the humidity finally relents and you can feel the air on your skin without wanting to leave it. Our backyard off Abercorn Extension was strung with lights. The tidal creek at the property line was dark and still and caught the reflection of everything above it. It looked peaceful. It almost was. Derek arrived first, wearing the kind of linen that communicated leisure as an identity. He slapped my shoulder and said, "Dad, you look incredible, like nothing even happened. Never better." I said, "Honestly, never better in my life." He had no idea what that meant. Melissa came in behind him, hugged Patricia, handed me a card. I opened it on the spot. Inside, she had written, "Dad, I'm so relieved. You're home. We love you." I looked at her handwriting. I thought about a 7-year-old at her first dance recital, the one I missed because of a supply chain emergency in Augusta. I thought about where that girl had gone. "Thank you, sweetheart." I said. I meant it about the girl, not the woman who wrote the card. Brandon arrived last. Brandon always arrived last because he believed it established something. He was wearing a blazer over a collared shirt, his standard performance of authority look. He shook my hand with both of his, the way he always did when the warmth was intentional rather than natural, and said, 28 years. Dennis, that is genuinely something. It really is. I said, "Hey, I've got something for everyone tonight. A little acknowledgement of everything we've built." He smiled. "What kind of acknowledgement?" "The honest kind." He laughed like I was being sentimental. I was not. By 8:30, the backyard was full. Neighbors were moving between the tables. Patricia, the perfect hostess. The woman without a single visible weight on her. Derek was on his second whiskey. Melissa was laughing near the creek with someone's spouse. Brandon was doing what Brandon did at every social function I'd ever watched him attend. He was building relationships. Working the room. Networking at my anniversary party. Cal Okafor was parked on the street out front. Folder on the passenger seat. Engine off. Roy Thatch had made a call to the Chatham County Sheriff's Office that afternoon. As a professional courtesy to someone he'd worked with before, 2 plainclothes deputies were parked 2 houses down. Everything was where it needed to be. I picked up a fork and tapped the side of my glass. "Can I get everyone's attention for a minute?" the yard quieted. Patricia turned from the conversation she was in and found my face across the crowd. She smiled. That luminous, social smile she wore like it was part of the dress. Derek raised his glass. Melissa faced me. Brandon crossed his arms and watched. 28 years. I said, 28 years is not a small thing. You sacrifice. You make choices that you trust are going to mean something. You build something together. You believe the people around you are building it with you. Someone nearby said, "Here. Here." Almost dying has a way of showing you what you've actually built. I continued. When I was lying in that hospital bed at Memorial Health, I had nothing to do except listen, and I heard things that I will carry for the rest of my life. Things that changed everything about how I understand the people standing in this backyard tonight. Patricia's smile did not leave, but something behind it shifted, just slightly, just enough. I reached down to the folding table beside me. 4 envelopes. Each one had a name on the front in my own handwriting. The yard was perfectly quiet now. Derek. My son moved forward with the easy confidence of a man expecting a toast to his name. He took the envelope, opened it. Read it. The confidence didn't disappear at once. It drained. Slowly. The way water drops in pressure before a pipe fails. Inside was a printed transcript. Every word Derek had spoken in that ICU room. The Bluffton properties. The capital comment. At 29, I've been patient long enough. His search of my private estate files. His expectation of my death as a financial event. Below that, a letter from Hargrove Building Solutions. Dated the previous Thursday. Derek. Effective immediately. Your position is terminated. The company vehicle is to be returned by end of business Monday. The fuel card has been deactivated. The monthly expense reimbursement arrangement ends tonight. And for anyone wondering about the future, my revised estate documents leave you $10,000. That's it. Use it however you like. Dad, I'm not finished. Melissa. She walked over with her arms already crossed, which was how she received information she suspected she wasn't going to like. She took the envelope carefully, opened it. Inside was her portion of the transcript. He was always at work. He never made time. He made choices. So I'm making mine. And something she didn't know existed, a screenshot of 14 months of wire transfers from M. Hargrove Design, Consulting to her personal account. With dates. With amounts. With a summary memo from Cal's office explaining exactly what M. Hargrove Design Consulting was and was not. Dad. I didn't. I found out, and I didn't know what to Melissa. My voice was level. You found out and you asked for your share. She said nothing. Her mouth stayed open. My name is coming off your lease co-signature as of Monday morning. You have 30 days to make your own arrangements. And the same as your brother, $10,000 in the revised will. That is the full extent of your inheritance. Patricia. The backyard had become a photograph. Nobody moved. Nobody touched a glass. The neighbors from Ardsley Park were finding things to look at on the ground. Our pastor from Grace Fellowship was looking at the tidal creek like he was reconsidering his attendance. Patricia set down her drink. She walked over and took the envelope from me with both hands. Opened it with steady fingers. Read it. Inside Roy Thatch's full surveillance report. 17 months. Paul Garrett. Bacon Park Tennis Courts. The Hotel on Abercorn. Tuesday afternoons. While I ran a company, she was simultaneously betraying and signing away. Below that, Cal's documentation. 11 transactions bearing her co-signature. The forged power of attorney, with her real handwriting next to a copy of mine that was definitively proven to be fabricated. And beneath all of that, divorce filing paperwork, already processed and recorded at Chatham County Superior Court on Friday afternoon. She went pale. Not flushed. Not tearful. Pâle. In the specific way that happens when reality outpaces the ability to manage the surface. 28 years? I said quietly. I never raised my voice. Not once that entire night. I did not need to. You stood at my bedside and told a physician that 61 years was a sufficient life. You signed your name to documents that moved nearly $500,000 out of the company I built with nothing. You helped put another man's name on the deed to our home while I was lying in an ICU. Matt, please. She started. Dennis. I said, not Matt. That is not my name. I paused. My attorneys filed the divorce paperwork Friday afternoon. Given that you co-signed the fraudulent transfers out of our business, the settlement I am offering is the deed to the rental duplex we purchased on Montgomery Street in 2007. That is what I am prepared to give you without further legal proceedings. If you prefer to let a judge review the complete fraud documentation, that is an available path. Your choice. Patricia Hargrove stood in the backyard she had decorated herself. In a burgundy dress she had bought herself, surrounded by every person in Ardsley Park who respected the life we supposedly shared, and she had nothing to say. Not a single word. Brandon. He had not moved from his position near the back of the patio. The blazer looked different now. It looked like what it was, a costume for a character he had been playing for a very long time. I didn't hand Brandon an envelope. I walked toward him, and I spoke at a volume the entire yard could hear. Your biological father was not there for you. I said, he left before you could even understand what leaving meant. I married your mother when you were 5 years old. I gave you a room in my home and a name to call me, and eventually the title that ran my entire operation. I took you to games and took you on trips, and I loaned you money. And I introduced you to every person in this industry as my son, because that is what I believed you were. Brandon's jaw was set. Dennis, I know. I said, you were worried the estate wouldn't include you because you weren't biological. I heard that. Cal documented it. I understand the fear. But there is no fear on this earth that explains $480,000 stolen across 3 years. 37 transactions. Your signature. Her signature. A forged version of mine. Brandon's eyes moved to Patricia. Then back to me. Cal Okafor filed a criminal complaint for identity theft, deed fraud, and financial elder abuse with the Chatham County Sheriff's Office yesterday morning. The warrant was signed by a judge at 11 a.w.w.w.m. I looked toward the gate at the side of the house. I think you all know what comes next. 2 plainclothes deputies walked through the gate. The yard produced a sound I don't have language for. A collective freeze. Someone's chair legs scraped backward on the flagstone. Derek stepped sideways as though distance from Brandon was a legal strategy. Melissa grabbed the back of a table. Brandon Whitfield. Brandon looked at me one final time. Something in his face broke. Not remorse exactly. More like the expression of a man who had wagered everything on an outcome that didn't come. You were the only father I ever had. He said, barely above a whisper. I know. I said, that part was completely real. And it made what you did worse. Not better. They walked him out through the side gate. The yard watched in silence that lasted long past the sound of the car door closing. Patricia had her hand pressed flat against her sternum. Derek was looking at his shoes. Melissa had started crying. Quietly. In the specific way of someone unsure whether they're crying for themselves or for something they actually lost. I picked up my glass from the table. Looked out at the neighbors. At the pastor. At the tidal creek catching the string lights. I want to thank everyone for coming. I said, genuinely. The food is excellent. I chose the caterer myself. Please eat. This night cost enough. A few people managed something like a stunned smile. I am 61 years old. I said, I have apparently already lived a full life. According to at least one person in this backyard. But I have a company that is still standing and still mine. I have a foundation in my father's name that I have been neglecting in favor of people who did not deserve the attention, and for the first time in longer than I can honestly remember, I drained my glass. Set it down. There is not a single person in my life who is only here because of what I can give them. I buttoned my jacket, walked through the back door, through the kitchen, through the front hall, out the door. My car was parked on the street, packed since Wednesday. 2 bags. The things that mattered. I pulled away from Abercorn Extension for the last time, turned onto Duran Avenue, headed toward the bridge. My phone buzzed once on the seat. Patricia. I did not answer. 4 minutes later I pulled into a gas station lot, typed 1 sentence, and sent it. I heard every word. Every single one. Then I put the phone in the glove compartment. Found the highway. Rolled down the windows. And drove. They wanted an inheritance. I gave them a reckoning. They planned my estate while I was still breathing. So I settled it myself. In front of everyone. While I was still standing. You wanted what I built. You got exactly what you earned. If this story stayed with you, hit the like button. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. And drop a comment below. Let me know where you're watching from. I will see you on the next one.